I came home from a client dinner, opened my banking app out of habit, and froze. $360,000.
Gone.
Every cent I had saved over 8 years. Every sleepless night. Every freelance contract. Every second job. Every bonus stacked and counted for one goal. My first house. I blinked. Refreshed the screen.
Still gone.
I called the bank, heart in my throat. The representative calmly explained that the withdrawal was made legally by someone with joint access. Someone I had once, years ago, added for emergency only. My parents. I didn't call right away. I didn't scream. I drove straight to their house, silent the whole way there. My father was in the backyard, grilling. My mother was arranging roses on the table like it was any other evening. My sister sat with her legs crossed, scrolling on her phone, wearing a designer sweater I knew I hadn't seen before. "I need to talk to you," I said, barely managing to keep my voice level. My father smiled. "Ah, you saw it?" I blinked. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Thanks for your naivety, Maya. Your money has now secured your sister's bright future. She's going to London, the full program. Travel, tuition, everything." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "You stole from me." My mother rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "Stole? Maya, please. You've been hoarding that money for years. For what? A little house in the suburbs? A girl like you would have wasted it anyway." And my sister? She didn't even look up. Just smirked, like she'd already won. I couldn't hold back anymore. I laughed. Once.
Loudly.
A strange, hollow laugh that startled all three of them. Because the money they took wasn't mine. Not really. Not anymore. You see, I'm not just some naive little saver they thought I was. They never asked how I doubled that original $360,000. They never asked how I paid off my debts early, or how I took 2 years off work and somehow came back richer. Because they never cared. They only saw the visible account, the decoy I kept for appearances. They never even imagined there might be more. That I might be more. So as they stood there, smug and stupid and sure that they'd ruined me, I smiled wider. Because the account they drained? It was bait. They took the trap. And now they taught me exactly what I needed to know. I turned to leave. My father called after me. "You're being childish, Maya. This is family." I stopped at the door, looked over my shoulder.
No.
This was business. You made that clear. And I walked out. My name is Maya. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because the money they stole was a test. And now, the daughter they built to serve them was about to burn their future to the ground. I wasn't raised to be loved. I was raised to be useful. I was the firstborn, the mature one, the dependable daughter, the built-in fixer. They didn't celebrate me. They utilized me. While my younger sister, Alina, was praised for her looks, charm, and potential, I was handed responsibilities. At 10, I was babysitting her. At 13, I was balancing grocery budgets. At 16, I was forging my own permission slips because my parents were too busy to sign anything that wasn't about Alina. They taught me early that attention was currency, and I didn't have enough to buy any. But what I could earn was usefulness. So I became the best at it. I worked part-time jobs through college, kept my grades perfect, cooked dinner when mom was too tired, covered for dad when his business failed quietly behind closed doors. And still they barely looked at me. Alina, meanwhile, coasted through life on a golden float. Failed classes? She's just figuring herself out. Expensive hobbies? She deserves to try things. Impulsive trips, new boyfriends, big mistakes? They were always learning experiences. But I was held to a different standard. I was the fallback plan, the dependable one, the piggy bank in human form. When I got my first full-time job, I thought maybe they'd be proud. Instead, they asked for help with the mortgage. I gave it. When I bought a used car for cash, they borrowed it for 6 months. When I opened a savings account, they casually asked to be added, just in case anything ever happened. I didn't hesitate, because I didn't think they'd take it. I thought maybe this time they'd prove me wrong. They didn't. That $360,000 wasn't a number to me. It was 8 years of skipped vacations, packed lunches, quiet birthdays, and 3 a.m. freelance deadlines. It was my first house. My only plan. They knew all that. And they still took it. With a smile. Because they never saw me as someone who deserved. Just someone who provided. But here's what they didn't see coming. That usefulness they weaponized? It made me dangerous. Because I didn't just save. I studied. I learned. I planned. And over the years, while I handed them the visible crumbs, I was building my own feast behind closed doors. I funneled freelance income into diversified investments. I put money in a trust. I bought digital assets under an alias. I partnered quietly in 2 early-stage startups. I registered an LLC abroad. Everything they thought I was saving was already doubled and buried in places they could never touch. The account they drained? It wasn't my future. It was my trap. Because if you want to know who someone really is, give them access to your peace and see what they do with it.
They chose theft.
They chose betrayal. So now I was free of obligation, free of guilt, free to become someone they couldn't control and couldn't predict. People say I'm quiet, polite, easy to overlook. They're right, and that's exactly why I win. Because what my parents thought was my entire savings was nothing more than a decoy. The $360,000 they drained? It was technically mine, but it wasn't my wealth. It was my bait. Let me explain. Years ago, when I started making decent money, I opened 2 accounts. One joint savings account I told my parents about, and one private one they never knew existed. Guess which one they always asked about? I'd intentionally funnel a portion of my income into the joint account. Enough to look impressive. Enough to prove I was doing well. I let them brag about it to family. Maya's so responsible. She's saved over 6 figures already. Meanwhile, I moved my real income, my consulting contracts, my stock payouts, my crypto flips, into separate channels. By the time I was 29, I had built over $1.1 million across diversified accounts, trust funds, and business equity. But my parents? They were watching the wrong wallet. They always were. The funny part? They thought they were clever, withdrawing the money just before I closed on a house. They thought they beat me to the punch. It's too late for her to pull it back now. I overheard my mother say the day after the theft. It's done. She'll forgive us eventually. They really thought I was that predictable. But they didn't know the house deal was fake. They didn't know I had forged the timeline emails, fake agent contacts, even a fake property listing. I made it believable because I wanted them to think they were stealing something precious. They were always going to take it. I just made sure they did it when I was ready. Because what they stole was recoverable. It was tracked, isolated, and insured. Yes, insured. I had moved those funds through a business pipeline the month before. Filed it as capital movement. When I filed the theft report and provided the evidence, names, access logs, IP locations, timestamps, the bank's fraud division flagged it within 48 hours. They'll get a nice little investigation out of it. And I'll get my claim reimbursed. Quietly, without them ever realizing. But I won't tell them that. Let them think they robbed me blind. Let them think they won. Because I wasn't after the money. I was after truth. And they gave it to me in the clearest language they speak, greed. They confirmed everything I'd spent a decade trying not to believe. That I was never the daughter they protected. I was the daughter they exploited. So now the script flips. They have no idea what's already moving behind the scenes. But the car? That was in my name. The house? Joint investment deed that I can now legally pull out of. Their golden daughter's tuition? Backed by a guarantor.
Me.
And I've just sent the notice to dissolve that agreement. They took from the wrong daughter. But they did it with such confidence. I almost want to thank them. Because in robbing me, they revealed everything.
And now?
I'm done playing pawn. I'm about to become the architect of their unraveling. You don't survive in a family like mine by being emotional. You survive by being strategic. And I had been planning this for years. The moment I realized I was just their backup plan, not their daughter, was the moment I started thinking like a banker, not a child. So no, I wasn't shocked when they stole the $360,000.
I wanted them to.
Because now, I had everything I needed. Intent,
Opportunity.
evidence, and best of all, silence. I didn't yell when I found out. Didn't fight. Didn't try to reason. Because the moment you raise your voice, they dismiss you as hysterical. But silence? Silence terrifies selfish people. It makes them wonder what you know, what you're doing, what you're planning. And I was planning everything. I started with the utilities. For years, I'd been quietly paying their electricity, phone, and internet bills through auto-draft. No thanks, no acknowledgement, just quiet dependence. I canceled it all in one evening. The next morning, I got a text from my dad. Hey, do you know what's going on with the power company? The bill didn't process this month. I didn't reply. That weekend, I removed myself from the cosign line of credit I'd helped them open. They had no idea I could do that without their signature, but I could.
Because I set it up that way.
One letter, one fax, one form.
Done.
Their credit dropped by 72 points in 2 days. Then I cashed out of the family investment they'd forgotten. I still had a 49% claim to a silent stake in the house my father built himself, but funded with my money 5 years ago. I sent a formal withdrawal notice through my attorney. They'd either have to buy me out or sell. And I already knew they couldn't afford to do either. Meanwhile, my sister? Still parading around Europe like she was untouchable. Until she wasn't. Because the final string I cut was the guarantor form for her university program. She was accepted into a prestigious international business school. What no one knew was that the school required a financial backer from the home country, someone legally responsible if tuition lapsed. That person was me. I had done it years ago, quietly, to help her get in. A favor she never even acknowledged. So I revoked it. One email, one scan.
Done.
The school's financial office emailed her the next day. I can only imagine the panic. The money they stole? It was already spent. But their security blanket?
Me?
I was gone. And all the systems they used to lean on were starting to collapse. Quietly, slowly, relentlessly. No explosions. No screaming matches. Just doors closing. I knew they'd come knocking eventually. But this time, I wouldn't be home. Because they thought I was some fragile little savings account with a soft voice and a good heart. They didn't realize I was watching, waiting, setting the table for a reckoning. I let them steal from me, so I could finally walk away without guilt. So when they called it family, I could say, with clean hands and a calm smile, this was business. You know what no one ever tells you? Leaving isn't the hard part. Watching them realize you were the foundation, that's the satisfying part. Once they drained the $360,000, they thought I'd scream,
Cry. Beg.
Instead, I got to work. Operation Extraction had one goal: remove every single link, dollar, document, and obligation that tied me to them. And I started with the most personal one. My name. I legally changed it just the middle and last. Quietly. Efficiently. They wouldn't know until they saw it in a headline or a contract. I updated my legal and business records, pulled my signature off every co-owned item, from the joint safety deposit box to the emergency insurance account I once opened for my dad after his heart scare. All gone. Every time they tried to use something with my name on it, they'd hit a wall. And I didn't stop there. Remember that modest car I bought for the family years ago? The one my mom drove like she owned it? I reported it as reclaimed.
Because it was still legally mine.
And guess what? She'd never transferred the title. Classic oversight. One tow truck later, the car was in my name and back in my garage. I sold it the next week and used the funds to upgrade Ava's school account. Oh, right. Ava. My daughter. Did I mention my parents never once offered to babysit? Never celebrated her birthdays. Never visited her school. And yet, somehow, my mother always found a way to call herself Grandma of the Year on Facebook. So I deleted every photo of Ava from their shared cloud folder. revoked permissions, digitally erased the narrative they never earned. It was surgical. Every time they turned a corner in their life, something was missing. The light bill? Unpaid. The retirement account my dad didn't even realize I was still contributing to? Frozen. The travel credit card my sister used under my name to book hotels?
Closed.
Piece by piece, I dismantled the life they built on top of me. And while they were flailing, I was flying. I moved into a high-rise condo, signed 2 new consulting clients, started planning a retreat for young women like me, the forgotten daughters, the quiet providers, the ones who paid for everyone else's peace. I didn't announce it, didn't flaunt it, because I didn't need them to see me rise. I just needed them to feel the fall. One night, I got a message from my father. "We need to talk. What you're doing is petty and hurtful." It was the first time he'd reached out in weeks. And still, there was no apology. Just blame. Just deflection. So I sent back one line. "You stole a test, not my life. And I've already passed." Then I blocked his number. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about removal. Removing myself from their chaos. Removing the lies I used to tell myself to survive. Removing the guilt they'd carefully embedded in every thank you they never said. I wasn't leaving angry. I was leaving free. And the family that thought I'd collapse without them? They were finally learning the truth. I wasn't their backup plan. I was their only plan. And I just walked out the front door. It started with a flight. A canceled one. Alina had booked a business class seat to Milan for a networking conference her university recommended, probably more for the selfies than the seminars. She posted the itinerary weeks in advance. Airplane London, Milan, Barcelona. Hashtag Boss Babe in Europe. But when she arrived at Heathrow, she was told the booking was cancelled. Insufficient funds. She called the airline, then the credit card company. She tried to play the part of the wronged elite, but the truth was simpler. I closed the card. Because it was mine. And for years, she used it with my permission, for emergencies. Just this once. "You'll get it back, right?" She never did. So I took it back. And that was just the start. 2 weeks later, her university sent a notice. Tuition installment overdue. She emailed them frantically, attached a screenshot of the payment promise, guaranteed under my name. They replied, "We regret to inform you that your financial guarantor has formally withdrawn responsibility. Please settle the remaining balance within 14 days or your enrollment will be reviewed." I had been her invisible net. Every semester, every fee, every glitch in her student visa, fixed by me, not because I loved her more than she loved me, but because I wanted to believe that if I gave enough, they'd finally see me. They never did. So I stopped giving. Alina messaged me 3 times. Once with fake sweetness. "Hey, can you help? I think something went wrong with the payments." Once with passive aggression. "It's really messed up that you'd sabotage your own sister." And finally, desperation. "They're talking about suspension. I don't have the money. Please, Maya. Please." I didn't reply. Not because I was cruel. Because I was done. I wasn't her invisible donor anymore. I wasn't her faceless fallback. I was the sister she ignored at dinners. The one she rolled her eyes at when I didn't dress trendy. The one she stole from and watched my parents laugh about it like it was a prank. She had posted once, back when she got accepted into her program. All thanks to the support of my amazing parents. Hashtag blessed, hashtag grateful. I was never mentioned. And that's fine. Because now, she could run to them for help. Except their house was on the verge of foreclosure. Their bank account was under investigation. Their network was dried up. And her amazing parents? Busy trying to get the lights turned back on. The golden child wasn't golden anymore. She was just another shadow in a sinking ship. And I was sitting by the window of my new condo, watching the sunset, eating takeout, my phone on silent. I didn't need an update to know how it was going. Because for the first time, their lives were playing out without my money propping them up. And the silence that once haunted me, now it healed me. Because no amount of status, no shiny degree, no pretty pictures in foreign cafes could save her from the fact that her whole world had been financed by the sister she mocked. And that sister just pulled the plug. It started small. A single email. No subject line. Just, "Can we talk?" I didn't open it. Then came the messages. From my mother. "Maya, please. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." From my father. "This is beneath you. We're your family." From Alina, full breakdown mode. "They're threatening to kick me out. I didn't know you'd do this.
Please.
Please." Each one more desperate than the last. They didn't realize. I wasn't being cold. I was being clear. They had made a choice. When they took my money and laughed. When they called me naive. When they said I'd waste it anyway. They knew what they were doing. They just didn't think I'd respond like this.
They thought I'd cry.
Instead, I built walls thick, quiet, and unbreakable. They tried calling. From new numbers. Old numbers. Blocked numbers. They tried messaging on platforms I forgot I still had. And I let every single alert flash across my screen. Unread. Unanswered. Until one voicemail broke the pattern. It was my father's voice, but not the version I grew up with. No arrogance. No power. Just collapse. "We didn't think you'd actually cut us off. Your mother's not sleeping. Your sister's losing her place. We're drowning, Maya. We didn't mean for it to go this far." That line. We didn't mean for it to go this far.
It stuck with me.
Because they did. They meant for me to go that far, far enough to lose everything. They just never imagined I'd stop turning around for them. That afternoon, I got a delivery. An envelope. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a letter, shaky, rushed. From my mother. "You don't have to forgive us. Just help. That's what family does." And taped to the back. A childhood photo of me. 7 years old. Smiling. Missing front teeth. They must have dug it out like a relic, hoping sentiment would do what guilt couldn't. I stared at the picture. That little girl? She deserved love. Deserved protection. Deserved to grow up in a home that didn't label her as less just because she didn't shine the way her sister did.
And
now she was safe. Because I had built a life around her, and for her, that they could never touch again. I took the photo, folded it carefully, and placed it in my drawer. The letter? I burned it. The next morning, I sent them a single message. One line. No hello. No emotion. No wiggle room. Funny how fast the future collapses when it's built on stolen bricks. Then I blocked them. Every single one. No more explanations. No more defense. No more pleading to be seen. I was done. Not angry. Finished. Because the one thing they were never prepared for was the girl they used as their foundation finally walking away and letting the whole damn house fall. They thought they took everything from me. What they actually did was pay for my freedom. Because with every selfish decision, every cruel remark, every dollar they stole, they severed the last threads I was too loyal to cut. So I thanked them.
Silently.
And then I moved forward. The week after I blocked them, I closed on a property in the hills. Quiet. Peaceful.
Mine.
Paid in full. I renovated the guest room into a studio. For writing, dreaming, resting. The walls are lined with books I never had time to read when I was busy funding everyone else's comfort. The kitchen is always stocked. The bills are on autopay for my home. And Ava? She's thriving. She doesn't ask about them anymore. She doesn't flinch when the doorbell rings. Because our home is filled with softness now, not survival. I used a portion of my actual savings, the part they never touched, to launch a mentorship fund for girls like me. First generation. Overlooked. Used as emotional ATMs by the people who were supposed to love them. It's called Daughters Who Stayed. Because we did stay far too long. Now, we build exits. The fund quietly covers tuition, housing, therapy, or whatever peace looks like for the girls who never got to have it. No fanfare. Just healing. Last month, a journalist reached out. Wanted to do a story on my financial journey. Self-made millionaire. Estranged from her family. I declined the interview, not because I'm ashamed, but because they don't deserve a spotlight. I'm not the girl they forgot anymore. I'm the woman they lost. And the world I built? It's not built on spite. It's built on clarity. They taught me what not to become. And in doing so, they handed me the blueprint for becoming unstoppable. Sometimes I still think about that moment. My father laughing. My mother's smugness. Alina's indifference. I think about how sure they were that I was weak. How proud they were to tell me the money I earned had secured someone else's bright future. And I smile. Because that was the last moment they'd ever feel power over me. Now my power is quiet.
But vast.
It's in the way my phone doesn't light up with demands anymore. It's in the way my bank account only reflects my own needs. It's in Ava's smile. In the stillness. In the enoughness of our days. And that girl, the one they underestimated, she didn't waste anything. She just invested it in the one place they never could control. Herself. They stole a decoy and called it a victory. But I built an empire in silence. And the daughter they erased from the story? She became the one they'll never be able to rewrite.
The mashed potatoes were still warm when the knife went in. Not the one on the table, but the one my mother drove through my back with 10 quiet words. "We voted," she said, rising from her seat and lifting her wine glass like a queen making a toast. "And you're not family anymore." Silence fell. Then came the clinking of cutlery being set down. Then a pause. And then they clapped. Some hesitated. My cousin Marla looked uncomfortable, but she clapped anyway. My brother grinned like this was the punchline to an inside joke. My aunt laughed loudest, like she'd been waiting years for this. I looked around the table, this table I helped pay for, in a house partially bought with the savings I once handed over, just until things get better. Faces I'd fed, supported, comforted when things fell apart. My seat suddenly felt cold. I blinked once. No tears, just a strange stillness settling inside me. My mother stared at me with a smug calmness. "It's nothing personal," she added, as if that made it better. "We just think it's time you learned that being useful doesn't mean you belong." I could feel my heart pounding, not out of pain, but out of clarity. I stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of my dress, and reached into my bag. They all watched with mild curiosity. I pulled out a thick folder, a pale beige one, crisp and heavy. I placed it gently on the center of the table, right next to the half-carved turkey. "Then I guess," I said softly, "you won't need this." My mother raised an eyebrow, reached for it with a smirk still dancing on her lips. She flipped it open, and then she screamed, a sharp, guttural sound, not of fear, but of shock and fury. It sliced through the room like broken glass. My brother stood up, alarmed. "What the hell is this?" She kept flipping through the pages, her voice climbing. This is a joke, right? This isn't legal. You can't do this." But I could, and I had. They didn't know that while they were plotting to vote me out like a bad habit, I had already written them out of the foundation they stood on. No one at the table spoke. The laughter died. Marla's fork clinked to the floor. My aunt's mouth hung open, suddenly unsure. I looked around again, this time not searching for validation, but soaking in the last glimpse of something I had finally outgrown. My name is Zara, and from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me, because some families raise daughters. Others raise replacements until the replacement walks away with everything. When I was 9, I learned how to unclog a sink, not because I wanted to, because my mother said, "You're the oldest, figure it out." When I was 11, I started babysitting my siblings after school. By 13, I was cooking dinner. By 16, I had 2 part-time jobs, one after school, one on weekends. And by 18, I was paying the electric bill while my younger brother played video games in an air-conditioned room. That was my role, not daughter, not child, caretaker, provider, ghost. They said things like, "Zara's so responsible," when it was convenient. But when things went wrong, the tone shifted. "Why didn't you remind me? Why didn't you handle it?" Zara should have known better. I was the built-in backup plan. And somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting for thank yous. Not because I didn't need them, but because I knew they'd never come. My brother, Liam, was the golden child. Always praised for doing the bare minimum. Got a standing ovation for passing his math test, while I silently pulled straight A's and brought home groceries on the same day. If I got tired, I was moody. If he got tired, he was overwhelmed. Even when I tried to speak up to say, "I'm stretched too thin," my mother would sigh and say, "You're just being dramatic. Your siblings are younger. They need you." But I needed someone too. She never saw that. To her, I wasn't someone you comforted. I was someone you relied on. Useful, dependable, replaceable if I ever stopped serving her needs. She never hugged me unless someone else was watching. Never once asked about my dreams. I was the child who did, not the child who was. And the older I got, the more invisible I became. Even when I moved out for college, on a partial scholarship I earned entirely on my own, she called me every week. Not to ask how I was, but to ask for money. Just a bit to cover groceries. "Can you send something for Liam's books? Rent's a little tight this month." And every time I gave, because I thought maybe if I gave enough, she'd finally say, "I'm proud of you." She never did. The one time I asked her, just once, if she appreciated what I'd done, she looked me in the eye and said, "You're just doing what any decent daughter would. You act like we should throw a parade." No, I didn't want a parade. I wanted a mother. Instead, I got a boss. A cold manager who audited my existence and only acknowledged me when I hit her expectations. Eventually, I stopped asking for warmth, stopped chasing applause, and buried the version of me that still believed love was something I could earn. I was the invisible daughter, but invisible doesn't mean weak. It just means they won't see you coming when you finally rise. It started with a laugh, the kind that stings more than it should. I was in the hallway during a family gathering, getting water from the kitchen when I heard my sister, Ava, talking to one of our cousins in the living room. "She's not really one of us," she said, almost playfully. "I mean, Zara's like staff. Reliable. Not fun." They both laughed. I didn't move. I just stood there, back pressed to the wall, heart thudding in my chest. Not one of us. Staff. Like I was the live-in help who'd overstayed her welcome. I let the water run. Let it overflow. I needed something to drown out the sound of that truth settling in. Later that evening, I saw a photo on Instagram, my cousin's wedding. A big family event. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. There was no text. No call. Not even a forwarded invitation. I confronted Ava. Her response? A shrug. "We figured you'd be busy. And you're not really close with that side of the family, right?" "I babysat her for 2 years," I replied. Ava blinked. Still. That's when I started looking more closely. At the group chats, one of them renamed without me. Another quietly archived. Family photos that used to be tagged with my name. Suddenly, I was cropped out or simply left untagged. Holiday plans discussed in whispers. Always spur of the moment, but somehow always organized without me. One day, I walked into the room and my brother Liam was joking with my cousin Jonah. "Zara's just the intern of this family," he said, chuckling. Jonah laughed harder than he should have. "What does that even mean?" I asked. They both looked up, surprised. A little guilty, but Liam covered it well. "Come on, don't be sensitive. You know you're the one who handles everything. We're just messing around." But they weren't. I wasn't one of them. I was the help desk. I started paying attention, saving screenshots, copying messages, documenting when they asked me for things, and how they spoke about me when they thought I wasn't listening. Every favor I did became a receipt. Every insult, verbal or silent, became evidence. Not because I wanted revenge. Not yet. But because something inside me had cracked, and I needed to remember why. I stopped offering help. Stopped answering every late-night call. Stopped picking up extra groceries just because I knew what brands they liked. And I started watching. What I saw was clear. They didn't just take me for granted. They'd already decided I didn't belong. They just hadn't said it to my face yet. But when they did, when my mother stood at that Thanksgiving table and said, "We voted," I wasn't surprised. Because by then, I'd already been counting the votes myself. They thought I was just the help. Just the girl who showed up when the lights needed fixing, when the fridge was empty, when tuition deadlines loomed and Dad's car needed repairs. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to pay attention to, was whose name was on the receipts. Mine. The mortgage? Half of it had been refinanced under my credit when Mom was denied the loan. I'd signed those papers at 24 because they said, "You're our best shot." The tuition payments for Liam? They came from my account, not once, not twice, but every semester, quietly on time. Even the lawyer they'd used last year to get Aunt May out of that messy property dispute? My retainer. My contact. They used my name like it was an access key, and I let them. I thought it made me part of something. But now I saw it for what it was, liability. So I hired a lawyer. Not for war, but for order. Her name was Trina. Sharp suit, sharper mind. She listened without flinching as I laid it all out. Every payment, every asset, every document that linked me to a family that had voted me out before they realized I'd been holding the ceiling up. Trina was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Do you want to pull out?" I looked her in the eye. "I want to take back what's mine." And so we began. The first step was protection. I bought a modest one-bedroom condo under a trust, away from the neighborhood I grew up in. Cozy, safe mine. No one knew the address but me. Next came the paper trail. Utilities for the family home? I'd been the guarantor for years. They were legally tied to me. We had them formally removed, every account cut off or reassigned. Property tax on the house? My name was still listed as the secondary payer. I submitted documents to clear that. Effective immediately, if the taxes lapsed, I wouldn't be responsible, they would. And then came the inheritance. My grandmother left me a portion of her land in her will, a quiet plot, sold years ago by my mother behind closed doors. But the records weren't buried deep enough. Trina found them. Turns out that sale had been illegal. The proceeds had to be returned or accounted for, and we filed a claim. By the time we were done, I had a folder. A beautiful, heavy folder. Inside it was the slow unraveling of every financial string they'd ever tied to me. Legal notices, ownership transfers, waivers, proof of control, proof of release. I didn't do it out of rage. I did out of peace. Because if they were going to erase me from the family, I'd erase my support right back. But I'd do it clean. They thought they were setting me free. What they didn't know was I'd already opened the door myself. My mother's fingers trembled as she flipped through the folder, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against paper that felt, for the first time, heavier than gold. The first document was the deed update, legal, notarized, stating I was no longer a financial cosigner on the house. The moment it landed in her name alone, so did the overdue taxes I'd been covering quietly for the past 2 years. The second page was a bank termination form. I had formally withdrawn my name from the joint emergency account. The same account she dipped into every time things were tight without asking. Third was the power of attorney reversal. Years ago, she'd tricked me into signing it during Dad's health scare. Said it's just paperwork. We need a backup. That backup just ended. Permanently. And finally, the real dagger. Proof of inheritance reversal. The proceeds from Grandma's land sale? Frozen. Reclaimed. And under legal review for compensation fraud. She went pale. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Just a gasp, low and animalistic, the kind of noise people make when they realize the game is over and they weren't even playing the right board. Then she screamed. A full-throated, no longer in control scream. Liam stood up, confused. "What's going on?" Aunt Denise grabbed the folder and scanned the pages, her face draining with every line she read. "Is this real?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Around the table, the atmosphere changed, celebration curdling into shock. The woman they had just voted out wasn't the weak link. She was the foundation, and now the ground was crumbling. Some tried to speak. Others just stared. A few avoided my eyes completely, like looking at me might burn. I picked up my bag, took one last look at the table, the linen cloth I bought last Christmas, the silverware I donated after their wedding anniversary, the dishes I once stayed up to wash while everyone else laughed in the living room. And I smiled. Not wide. Just enough. "I wish you all the best," I said quietly. No yelling. No drama. No final monologue. Just truth. A clean exit. I turned and walked out. Past the dining room. Through the hallway. Into the crisp November air. My heels clicked against the porch, steady, unbothered. Behind me, voices collided. What do we do now? She can't do this. Is this a joke? But I didn't turn back, because when someone shows you you're not family, the best thing you can do is let them live in the silence they tried to build around you, and see how loud it gets when you're no longer there to fill it. I stepped into my car, closed the door, and exhaled. For the first time in years, I felt light. 3 weeks later, a red notice was taped to the front door of the house I grew up in. Property under review for tax seizure. The county had sent multiple warnings, all of which had been previously redirected to me. Quietly, I'd been paying them to protect the home, even though I wasn't living there. But not anymore. Now, those unpaid dues were public. Liam called first. His voice was tight, frantic. Zara, my tuition payment didn't go through. What the hell is going on? I leaned back in my desk chair, calmly flipping through a notebook. You mean the fund I set up? The one under my name? You can't just... I didn't, I said, cutting him off. You did, when you voted me out. Click. Then Ava tried. Zara, Mom's not sleeping. She's been sick over this. You've always been the mature one. Can't you just fix it? I laughed once, quietly. I was always the one who cleaned up your messes. Now you'll learn how to live in them. The news spread quickly. A cousin DM'd me on Instagram. Is it true your mom lost the house? An aunt called to say, we never meant to hurt you. Even Uncle Hassan, who hadn't called in 5 years, sent a voice note that started with, your mother's not well, and ended with, maybe you've made your point. But I hadn't done it for a point. I'd done it for peace. And that peace meant no longer carrying guilt I didn't earn. When Mom finally called, not texted, not emailed, but actually called, I let it ring 4 times before answering. Her voice was brittle. Zara, you ruined us. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shake. I just let the words settle. Then I said, you voted. Pause. I just honored it. She didn't know what to say to that. I imagined she thought her guilt would work like it used to, as a hook to drag me back in. But I wasn't that version of me anymore. The version who said yes just to keep the peace. The version who gave everything to be seen as good. The version who mistook usefulness for love. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that boundaries are not betrayal. I wasn't their savior. I wasn't their ATM. I wasn't their fallback. I was free. And freedom comes with echo, the kind of silence that rings in the ears of those who never thought they'd lose you. I stood in front of the courthouse holding the simplest piece of paper I'd ever fought for, a legal name change. No fanfare, no drama, just a quiet goodbye to the last name that had followed me like a shadow I never chose. The name that reminded me of slammed doors, of being silenced, of being needed but never loved. I signed the form, took a breath, and whispered, that chapter's closed. From that day on, I carried a name that belonged to me. Not to the family that cast me out, but to the woman I'd become. Not long after, I launched the Daughters Unseen, a nonprofit for women like me. Women who had been the strong one in families that only knew how to take. Women raised in silence, told to shrink themselves, then blamed for the cracks in everything. We offered workshops, legal guidance, storytelling circles, healing retreats. But more than that, we offered validation. Because sometimes the greatest gift you can give a woman is to look her in the eyes and say, you were never the problem. I shared my own story in an essay called The Vote That Freed Me. It went viral. Thousands of shares. Emails from strangers who said, this is my life. Messages from women who had never told a soul what they'd been through until they read my words. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible. But more importantly, I wasn't alone. I found people who didn't expect me to earn love with labor. Friends who showed up without asking for anything. Women who called me sister, not because of blood, but because we'd bled the same way. And somewhere along the way, my smile came back. Not the polite, practiced smile I wore at family dinners. Not the tired, I'm fine, smile that masked exhaustion. But a real one. Soft, quiet, mine. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's permission to exist. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building, reclaiming, living. And this time, everything I built had my name on it. 1 year later, the scent of roasted vegetables and cinnamon filled my apartment, my home. The table was set with mismatched plates. Laughter echoed from the kitchen, and the living room glowed with candles instead of tension. It was Thanksgiving, but this time no one was performing. No one was waiting for me to clean up after them. No one whispered behind my back. No one held a secret vote about whether I deserved a place at the table. These people, my friends, my chosen family, brought food, stories, warmth. We clinked glasses over shared healing and cornbread. Midway through dinner, Cam, my friend from the nonprofit, leaned over and asked gently, "Do you ever miss them?" I paused, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I finally felt free enough to say it out loud. "No," I said, "because I never had them." She nodded, no judgment in her eyes, just understanding. After everyone left, I stood alone in the hallway, barefoot, wine glass in hand, letting the quiet settle. Not the suffocating kind, but the peaceful kind, like exhaling for the first time after holding your breath for years. I looked at the frame I'd hung earlier that day. Inside, it was the first page from the folder. The deed transfer, the start of my freedom. I'd mounted it like art, not out of spite, but as a reminder of the moment I reclaimed my life. The pen I used to sign those papers now sat in a shadow box beside it. And I smiled, because now every door in this home opened with my key. Every corner held joy, not judgment. Every chair welcomed the right people, no votes needed. They thought they could vote me out. They didn't know I held the pen.